I did not cry when my sister held up the ultrasound photo in front of the whole family. Instead, I smiled as if I had prepared a return gift for a long time. My husband held her hand under the table while my mother turned to ask me what I had done to push him away. They thought I would crumble right there at my own birthday dinner, but I had brought a file folder that locked away their future. My name is Reese Callahan. At 33 years old, I had just walked out of the glass doors of Northgate Risk and Ethics Partners with a promotion that terrified most of my male colleagues. I was officially their newest senior lead auditor. The city air tasted like cold metal and victory. I felt invincible. I felt untouchable. I drove home gripping the steering wheel, ready to pop a bottle of expensive champagne with my husband and tell him that our combined tax bracket was about to jump significantly. I found Gavin Price sitting at the kitchen island. The lights were dim. He was not holding champagne. He was holding a glass of water, staring at the granite counter as if it were a teleprompter. He did not smile when I dropped my keys on the counter. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a disaster report. "Reese, you're home," he said, his voice flat. He took a breath that sounded rehearsed. "We need to talk. I've been thinking. About us. About how we manage things." I paused. My auditor brain immediately picked up the tremor in his hands and the way he refused to make eye contact. "What things?" "Gavin." I asked. "Money," he said, finally looking at me but focusing somewhere near my ear. I think we should separate our finances, for fairness, so we both feel independent. I don't want to feel like I am just living off you." A normal wife would have panicked. A normal wife would have asked if he was leaving her or if she had done something wrong. But I deal in risk assessment. I deal in fraud detection. When a mediocre man suddenly uses corporate buzzwords like fairness regarding marital assets, he is not looking for independence. He is hiding a liability. I did not explode. I did not cry. I simply nodded with the professional detachment I used in boardrooms when a CEO tried to lie about quarterly earnings. "Okay," I said, keeping my face completely neutral. "If that makes you comfortable, Gavin, let's do it." He looked relieved. He let out a long sigh, thinking he had successfully navigated the difficult conversation. He thought he had won. He had no idea I had just opened a case file. I went upstairs, bypassed the bedroom, and went straight to my home office. I locked the door. I logged into the company payroll portal and redirected my entire salary to a brand new account at a different bank, one he did not know existed. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet. I named it Home Truth. I pulled the last 12 months of our joint checking statements. I scanned the lines like I was hunting for a rounding error in a Fortune 500 ledger. Then I saw it. A recurring charge. $49. Every single month on the 15th. The merchant descriptor was vague. Medical services. Maple Hollow Wellness. I frowned. Maple Hollow was a small town nearly 60 minutes away from our house. We had excellent doctors 5 minutes down the road. Nobody drives an hour for a $49 copay unless they do not want to be seen. My phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. It was a text from my younger sister, Jenna. "Can't wait for your birthday dinner. It's going to be so special. Love you." The exclamation points felt forced. The sweetness tasted like saccharine. A cold shiver went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Jenna usually only texted me when she needed rent money or to complain about our parents. This sudden affection was a red flag waving in a hurricane. Gavin appeared in the doorway behind me. He looked lighter, happier, smelling of a confidence he had not earned. "I booked a table at the Gilded Vault for your birthday," he announced, leaning against the doorframe. "And I insisted your parents and Jenna come. We should have everyone there, just to have the whole family together. It will be fun." The Gilded Vault was the most expensive steakhouse in the city. Gavin was suddenly generous right after asking to separate our money. The math did not add up. He smiled at me, thinking he was the director of this little play. He had no clue. He had just authorized an audit on his own life, and he had no idea that he was not going to survive the findings. I treated my marriage like a failing subsidiary that required an immediate forensic audit. I sat at my desk with dual monitors glowing in the dark, cross-referencing the transaction dates for the recurring $49 charge against Gavin's digital calendar. The pattern was so obvious it was insulting to my intelligence. April 15th, May 15th, June 15th. Every single instance aligned perfectly with a time block labeled client dinner or gym session. However, our gym was 10 minutes west of the house. Maple Hollow was 50 miles north. The geographic data did not lie, even if my husband did. The next morning, I decided to verify the anomaly with a control question. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Gavin tie his tie. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light and uninterested. I was looking at the statements. "What is Maple Hollow Wellness?" I saw a charge there. Gavin froze for a fraction of a second, his fingers fumbling on the silk knot. Then he let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like dry wood snapping. "Oh, it is just some vitamin injections and supplements. The guys at the gym recommended them. You know, for energy. Supposed to be great for focus." I took a sip of coffee to hide the smirk forming on my lips. He was a terrible liar. Retail purchases for supplements come through with specific merchant category codes for goods and services. This charge was coded strictly as a medical service provider. Furthermore, nobody drives an hour each way across state lines just to buy protein powder unless that powder is made of gold dust. He was constructing a narrative that had no structural integrity. To make matters worse, Jenna began infiltrating my home with alarming frequency. She started stopping by every evening, bringing cheap scented candles as gifts that I did not want. But it was her proximity to Gavin that triggered my alarm bells. She sat on the sofa next to him, her thigh pressing firmly against his denim jeans. When he told a joke that was objectively not funny, she threw her head back and laughed with a rhythm that felt practiced. "You are so funny, Gavin." "I don't know how Reese gets any work done with you around," she giggled, her eyes darting to me to see if the knife had landed. Gavin changed too. He started wearing a cologne that cost $300 a bottle, a scent far too musky for his office job. He began taking phone calls in the garage, whispering to the lawnmower. He slept with his phone under his pillow like it was a detonator. These were the classic cliched signs of a man who was acting a role he did not fully understand. I needed concrete proof, not just behavioral analysis. I went into the guest room and dug out an old iPad that Gavin had discarded 2 years ago. He had wiped the apps, but he had forgotten to unlink the cloud synchronization for his messages. I waited. It didn't take long. A message popped up on the cracked screen. "Jenna, don't let her suspect before dinner. Hold on for 2 more days. We are almost there." My stomach dropped, but I did not throw the iPad against the wall. I did not storm downstairs to scream at them. Confronting them now would only give them a chance to spin the story. They wanted to ambush me at the birthday dinner. They wanted an audience. I decided I would give them one, but I needed an expert witness to validate my findings. I called Alyssa Boone. Alyssa was a chief financial officer who ate external auditors for breakfast and had a heart made of pure tungsten. I laid out the data points for her: the request for separate finances, the medical charges, the synced texts, and the sudden desire for a family dinner. Alyssa was silent on the line for a long moment. "Reese, listen to me," she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious register. "This isn't just an affair. The financial separation, the timing, the sudden public dinner. This is an embezzlement scheme. He is liquidating the marriage. He is trying to zero out the accounts before he breaches the contract." Her words turned my pain into ice. The heat of betrayal evaporated, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. I looked at the man laughing in my living room with my sister. I realized I did not need his love anymore. I needed his bank routing numbers. I needed to document the theft. "I know," I whispered into the phone. I am going to let him do it, and then I am going to bury him in paperwork. I locked myself in the study and turned the room into a war room. I exported 6 years of banking history, credit card statements, and utility bills into a master file. I built a pivot table to analyze the inflow and outflow of our marital assets. The numbers were not just cold, they were brutal. The data showed that between 91 and 93% of our total household expenditure came directly from my earnings. Gavin had been living like a king on a pauper's contribution, yet he had the audacity to ask for financial separation. I dug deeper, filtering for cash withdrawals and peer-to-peer transfers. I found a pattern of small, jagged leaks in our savings. Transfers from our future home fund went to an intermediate digital wallet, and from there, they bounced to an account linked to a familiar email address, Jenna's email address. The transaction notes were pathetic attempts at justification, emergency car repair, or help with rent. I opened a new tab on my spreadsheet and named it Jenna. I cross-referenced every single transfer with my personal calendar. Every date money left our account coincided perfectly with nights Gavin claimed he was out with friends or working late. Then I pulled my credit report. My heart skipped a beat, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. There was a hard inquiry dated exactly 3 weeks ago from a lending institution specializing in home equity lines of credit. I picked up the phone and dialed the lender's number. I pitched my voice an octave higher, adopting the tone of a harried, confused wife. "Hi, I am just calling to check on the status of the price application. My husband said it was almost done, but..." I let the sentence hang, injecting a tremor of anxiety into the silence. The agent on the other end tapped on a keyboard. "Oh, yes, Mrs. Price. We are just waiting on the final authorization. We cannot release the funds until we receive the spousal consent signature. The notary is scheduled for Thursday." "Thursday? Right," I whispered, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Thank you." I hung up. The request to separate our finances was a smokescreen. Gavin was not trying to be independent. He was trying to liquidate the equity in our house, my house before he ran. He intended to strip the asset of its value, take the cash, and leave me with the debt. But money is just paper. Money can be recovered. What I found next was something I could never get back. I logged into the corporate health insurance portal. Since Gavin was unemployed when we met, I had added him to my premium plan. I searched for Maple Hollow Wellness in the claims history. I found a claim from 13 months ago. It was not for vitamins. It was a surgical procedure with a billing code I did not recognize immediately. I opened a new browser window and typed in the code. The search results loaded, and the room seemed to tilt sideways. The description read, "Bilateral vasectomy, permanent sterilization." I stared at the screen until the pixels burned into my retinas. 13 months ago. For over a year. Gavin had watched me track my ovulation cycles. He had watched me buy expensive fertility teas. He had held me when I cried over negative pregnancy tests, whispering that we just needed to keep trying. He had let me believe my body was failing me, while he walked around with a secret surgery that ensured I would never be a mother with him. A single, hot tear rolled down my cheek. It stopped at my jawline. I wiped it away with the back of my hand, aggressive and sharp. That was the only tear they were going to get. They had not just stolen my money. They had stolen my time. They had stolen my biology. I closed the laptop. The audit was complete. I did not need to scream. I needed to prepare for the execution. I called the Gilded Vault to modify the reservation Gavin had made. I did not want a private room where screams could be muffled. I requested Table 14, a semi-private alcove that offered intimacy but possessed a direct, unobstructed line of sight to the main bar. It was the perfect angle for a high-definition camera lens. Next, I dialed Marianne Klein. Marianne was not just a lawyer, she was a shark who viewed marriage certificates as business contracts waiting to be breached. "Marianne, I need a full divorce petition drafted by 5 o'clock, I said, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I sorted papers. Adultery, constructive fraud, and dissipation of marital assets. I also need a process server stationed 2 blocks away from the restaurant. I will text the signal. Reese. That is a tight turnaround. Marianne's voice crackled with professional interest. Do you have the evidence I have everything? I replied. Just have the server ready. I spent the next hour locking down the perimeter of my financial life. I placed a freeze on my credit reports with all 3 major bureaus. I called the bank handling the home equity line of credit. I am alerting you to fraudulent activity, I told the fraud department representative. Any signature submitting spousal consent on the price application is a forgery. If you disburse 1 cent, I will sue the bank for negligence. The account was flagged and frozen instantly. Gavin's exit strategy was dead before he even put on his suit. I needed one last piece of the puzzle to complete the picture. I contacted a forensic investigator I worked with occasionally on high-level corporate audits. I gave him Gavin's details and asked for a search on any undisclosed business entities. The report hit my inbox 40 minutes later. Gavin had registered a limited liability company called Price Advisory LLC 6 months ago. The company had 0 revenue, but it had significant expenses. Specifically, the business account was paying $3,200 a month for a luxury apartment lease in the Marina District. The tenant listed on the lease was Jenna Callahan. I did not call my sister. I did not confront my husband. I simply printed the documents. The lease, the bank statements, the sterilization record, the text logs. I punched holes in the pages and snapped them into a black leather binder. It looked like a presentation for a disciplinary hearing. I texted Alyssa. Table 14, 7 o'clock, sit at the bar, prop your phone up. I need audio and video. Her reply came within seconds. I will be there with a martini and a full battery. On my way to the restaurant, I stopped at a high-end jeweler. I bought myself a pair of solitaire diamond stud earrings. They were small, sharp, and flawless. I put them on in the car, watching them catch the light in the rearview mirror. I did not buy them to show off. I bought them to remind myself of who I was. I was sharp. I was clear. I was not a woman who begged. I checked my makeup one last time. I looked calm. I looked like a loving wife going to celebrate her birthday. They had no idea. They thought they were walking into a celebration where they would ambush me with their news. If they want a stage, I will give them one. I whispered to my reflection, smoothing my dress. But the script is mine. I arrived at the Gilded Vault 10 minutes early. The lighting was low, designed to make diamonds sparkle and secrets feel safe. I glanced toward the bar. Alyssa was already positioned on a stool with a clear view of table 14. She caught my eye in the mirror behind the rows of expensive scotch and tapped her fingernail against the rim of her martini glass. The camera was rolling. The stage was set. Moments later, Gavin walked in guiding my parents, Diane and Mark, with a hand on each of their backs. He strode through the dining room with his chest puffed out, nodding to the host as if he were the one paying the bill. He was playing the role of the benevolent provider perfectly. Reese, you look tired. My mother, Diane, sighed as she slid into the leather booth without hugging me. She adjusted her pearls and frowned at my suit, always chasing that next promotion. You become so cold when you work this much. A woman should be warmer. I am fine. Mom, I said, placing my napkin in my lap with precise movements. Just busy securing our future. Well, someone has to think about a family, Gavin interjected, his voice dripping with a carefully curated sadness. He looked at my father, seeking a male ally. I keep telling Reese that money isn't everything. I want a home filled with kids. I want to be a dad. But Reese, she just puts her career first. Always. My father shook his head, looking at me with disappointment. Reese, family is the real legacy. You can't hug a bank account. The irony was so thick I could taste it like metal in my mouth. I watched Gavin pour wine for my parents, his hands steady. He was framing me. He was painting a portrait of a frigid, barren workaholic so that when the blow came, everyone would think I deserved it. I did not defend myself. I did not list the fertility treatments I had paid for. I simply picked up my water glass and smiled a smile that did not reach my eyes. "You know, Gavin," I said softly, looking him dead in the face. Sometimes what a person says and what they actually do are two very different things. Gavin blinked, a flicker of unease passing through his eyes, but he quickly covered it by checking his watch. He was tapping his foot. He was anxious. "Where is Jenna?" he muttered, more to himself than to the table. "We should order the cake. The kitchen is slow tonight." "Relax, honey," my mother soothed him. "She is coming." Then, the air in the room shifted. Jenna appeared at the entrance. She looked nothing like the chaotic, messy sister who usually showed up in ripped jeans asking for a loan. Tonight, her hair was blown out in soft waves. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that buttoned modestly to her neck. She carried a rigid gift bag that held something square and heavy, like a picture frame. She walked with a glow of triumph, her chin held high. "Sorry I am late," she chirped, sliding into the booth right next to Gavin. She sat too close to him. The waiter approached to take drink orders. "I will have the Cabernet," my father said. "Just sparkling water with lime for me," Jenna announced, her voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. She placed a hand protectively over her stomach. "I am not drinking alcohol tonight." My mother's eyes widened. Gavin tried to suppress a smile and failed. It was the bait. They were begging me to ask why. I looked down. The tablecloth was long, but it did not hide everything. In the shadow of the table, I saw Gavin's hand drop to his knee. Jenna's hand moved instantly to meet it, their fingers interlaced, tight and intimate. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not just about love or lust. This was a public execution. They wanted to humiliate me in front of my parents. They wanted to break me down so completely that I would sign whatever document they slid across the table just to make the pain stop. They thought shame was their weapon. The waiter brought a small birthday cake with a single candle flickering on top. The flame danced in the draft of the air conditioner. "Make a wish, Reese," Gavin said, his voice thick with false affection. I leaned forward. The heat of the flame warmed my face. I looked at my cheating husband, my traitorous sister, and my judgmental parents. Let them speak, I thought, my mind sharpening into a blade. Let them say every word, and then cut them down. I blew out the candle. The smoke drifted up between us, gray and toxic. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered. Jenna picked up her silver fork and tapped it sharply against the rim of her water glass. The sound cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a distress signal. She reached into her bag and pulled out the rigid object she had been guarding all night. With a theatrical movement, she slid an ultrasound photograph across the white tablecloth until it rested directly in front of my birthday cake. "I have to be honest because we are family," Jenna said, her voice trembling with a rehearsed frailty. She looked at Gavin, then at me. "I am pregnant. With Gavin." The table went silent. Gavin nodded solemnly, staring intently at the breadbasket as if it were the most fascinating thing in the room. He refused to look at me. I waited for the explosion. I waited for my parents to scream at him for betraying their eldest daughter. Instead, my mother let out a long, disappointed sigh. She did not look at Jenna. She looked at me. "Oh, Reese," Diane said, shaking her head. "What did you do? You must have been so cold to him. A man has needs. If you had just given him a child when he asked, none of this would have happened. You drove him to this." I looked at my father. Mark Callahan, the man who taught me to ride a bike, just stared at his wine glass. He did not speak. He did not defend me. His silence was a heavy, suffocating blanket. He was complicit. That silence hurt more than the infidelity ever could. They all watched me, waiting for the tears. They expected me to run out of the restaurant sobbing, leaving them to comfort each other. I did not cry. I picked up my glass of Cabernet. I swirled the dark liquid, watching it coat the sides of the glass. Then I raised it in a toast. "Well," I said, my voice steady and devoid of any tremor. "Happy birthday to me." I took a sip. The wine was excellent. Panic flickered across Gavin's face. My mother frowned, confused by my lack of hysteria. I put the glass down and leaned forward, adopting the posture I used during an acquisition meeting. "So?" I said, looking directly at Jenna. "This is big news. We need to be practical. Who is your doctor? Which clinic did you go to? I want to make sure the baby has the best care." Jenna blinked. She was prepared for anger, not administrative questions. Liars hate specifics. I went to a private clinic," she stammered. "Dr. Evans, at Maple Hollow Wellness." My heart stopped for a second, then beat harder. There it was. The lie had intersected with the truth I had uncovered in my audit. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Oh, Maple Hollow Wellness. That place. It is certainly very useful for our family. Gavin stood up abruptly. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. "Reese, can I talk to you?" In the hallway. "Now," he demanded, his voice tight. I stood up and followed him. He led me toward the restrooms, away from the main dining floor but still visible to the bar where Alyssa was sitting. He pulled out his phone and opened a document. "Look, this is a mess," Gavin hissed, leaning in close. "I know you are in shock. I know you are hurting. Let's just end this cleanly. I will move out tonight. I just need you to sign this separation agreement so I can get my name off the house deeds and we can split everything. Just e-sign it now. Reese, let me go." He held the screen out to me. The title of the document was minimized, but the signature box was highlighted in yellow. I read the fine print at the bottom. It was not a separation agreement. It was the spousal consent form for the home equity line of credit. He was trying to trick me into authorizing a $200,000 loan against my own house while I was supposedly blinded by grief. I looked at him. He really thought I was stupid. "No," I said. What Gavin whispered, his eyes widening. I said no. I raised my voice loud enough for a passing waiter and two couples leaving the restaurant to hear. "I will not sign a loan document for you. Gavin, I am not giving you money." Gavin flinched as people turned to stare. He shoved his phone back into his pocket, his face flushing red. "Fine," he muttered. "We will do it the hard way." "Yes," I agreed, smoothing my skirt. "We certainly will." I turned around and walked back to the table. I sat down, refreshed my lipstick, and looked at my family with the calm demeanor of a woman who had just finished touching up her makeup, rather than a woman who had just been asked to finance her own betrayal. I sat back in my chair, swirling the wine in my glass, watching the red liquid coat the crystal. I looked at Jenna with the detached curiosity of a biologist studying a specimen that was trying to camouflage itself and failing miserably. "So, Jenna," I asked, keeping my voice light and conversational, "how many weeks are you exactly? And when is the due date?" Jenna blinked rapidly. She looked at Gavin for a cue, but he was busy trying to look like a proud father while avoiding my gaze. I am about 12 weeks, Jenna stammered, smoothing the napkin on her lap. "The baby is due in late January or maybe early February. The doctor said the dates can shift." 12 weeks, I repeated slowly, letting the time frame hang in the air. "That is interesting." "Because according to your Instagram timeline, exactly 12 weeks ago you were in Cabo San Lucas with your girlfriends for spring break. I remember the photos very clearly. You were doing body shots of tequila on a boat. You posted a video of yourself dancing on a table with a bottle in your hand every hour." Jenna's face drained of color. She opened her mouth and closed it like a fish out of water. I didn't know I was pregnant. Then, she protested, her voice shrill. And it was just one drink. You are trying to twist things. It looked like a lot more than one drink. I noted dryly. But let's look at the medical evidence. I reached out and picked up the ultrasound photo she had displayed so proudly near the cake. It was glossy and warm from being held in her sweaty hands. I held it up to the candlelight, squinting at the top corner. The text was blurry, deliberately so, but the watermark was visible if you knew what to look for. It did not list a patient name. It certainly did not say Maple Hollow Wellness. In faint gray letters, it read Stock Image Source. May I ask? I said, looking her dead in the eye. Is this definitely your ultrasound? Jenna yours and Gavin's taken today. Yes, she snapped, her eyes darting to my parents for support. Why are you being so difficult? It is our baby. Stop trying to ruin this just because you are jealous. I am just admiring the technology, I said calmly. I placed the photo back on the table, face up, ensuring it was directly in the line of sight of Alyssa's camera lens at the bar. I had them on record confirming the lie. My mother cleared her throat, clearly annoyed by my interrogation. She reached over and patted Gavin's hand. Reese, stop picking at her. Diane scolded me. We need to talk about practicalities. Since Jenna is having the first grandchild, and you are single again, essentially. It makes sense for you to move into that little condo you bought for investment. You should sign the house over to Gavin and Jenna. They need the space for the nursery. It is the only fair thing to do. You don't need 4 bedrooms for just yourself and your laptop. I looked at Gavin. He was sitting up straighter now, his chest puffed out again. The panic from the hallway had vanished, replaced by the smug satisfaction of a man who believes he has won the lottery without buying a ticket. He actually thought my parents' social pressure would force me to sign the loan document disguised as a separation agreement. He thought he was getting the house, the money, and the girl. You are right, Mom, I said, nodding slowly. We absolutely need to talk about fairness. Fairness is the most important thing to me. I reached down to the floor and lifted my heavy leather tote bag. I placed it on the table with a deliberate, heavy thud. The silverware rattled against the china. The sound silenced the table. Slowly, methodically, I pulled out the thick black binder. I laid it on the pristine white tablecloth. It looked like a tombstone in the middle of a celebration. What is that? Gavin asked, his smile faltering. I rested my hand on the cover. Before we decide who lives where, and before we talk about who is paying for what, we are going to look at the data. I unlatched the binder. The metal rings clicked open with a sharp, mechanical sound, like the pin being pulled from a grenade. I smiled at them. A small, terrifyingly calm smile. Let's review the facts, I whispered. The waiter approached our table with the bill tucked discreetly inside a leather folder. He moved to place it in the center of the table, but I raised my hand, stopping him mid-motion. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel, please split the check. I will pay for my own meal and 1 glass of wine. The rest of the bill, including the bottles for the table and the cake, goes to the gentleman who organized the evening. He insisted on hosting. Gavin's face drained of blood, turning a sickly shade of gray. He reached for his wallet with trembling fingers, trying to maintain the charade of the wealthy patriarch in front of my parents. He pulled out his platinum credit card and handed it to the waiter. 2 minutes later, the waiter returned. He leaned down, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. I am sorry, sir. The card was declined. Gavin laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that fooled no one. Must be a chip error. Try this one. He handed over a second card. The waiter returned 30 seconds later. Declined again. Sir, insufficient funds. The mask of the successful provider shattered right there on the floor of the gilded vault. My mother looked at Gavin, then at the expensive wine bottles, her eyes widening in horror. Jenna slammed her hand on the table. Oh my God, Reese, stop being so petty, just pay the bill. You know he is good for it. You are so stingy. We will pay you back later. I looked at my sister, who was wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly car payment. Jenna, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You are starting a family. You are about to have a baby. Surely you and the father of your child can afford a birthday dinner if you can't buy a steak. How are you going to buy a crib? I did not wait for an answer. I flipped the first tab of my binder. It was labeled Financials. Let's look at why the cards are declined. I said. I turned the binder so my father could see the charts. This is a pivot table of our household expenses for the last 6 years. The blue bar is my contribution. The red bar is Gavin's. As you can see, I have paid between 91 and 93% of all bills. But look here, I pointed to a series of highlighted transactions. Every month, money leaves our joint savings. It goes to a digital wallet, and then it lands here. I tapped the destination account. Jenna's personal checking, labeled as emergency car repairs, help with rent, medical needs. I have subsidized your life for years. Jenna, through him. That's a loan, Gavin sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. Is it? I asked. I flipped to the next tab. Housing. This is a lease agreement for a luxury apartment in the Marina District. I announced. The rent is $3,200 a month. It is signed by a company called Price Advisory LLC. That is Gavin's shell company. The tenant listed is Jenna Callahan. My mother let out a small, choked sound. She brought her hand to her mouth, her fingers shaking. She looked at Jenna, who was shrinking into the booth. You said you paid for that apartment with your modeling money, my mother whispered. He didn't pay for it either. Mom, I corrected her. I did. He siphoned it from my salary. I flipped to the third tab, HELOC. And this, I said, pointing to a document with a digital signature. This is an application for a home equity line of credit for $200,000 against the house I bought before we were married. Look at the spouse signature. I pointed to the scrawl at the bottom. That is supposed to be my signature. The timestamp says it was signed at 2 o'clock last Tuesday. At 2 o'clock last Tuesday. I was presenting a quarterly risk assessment to the board of directors. I have 12 witnesses. I looked Gavin dead in the eyes. This is forgery. This is bank fraud. Gavin opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. Don't bother. I said, I already called the bank. The loan is frozen. The fraud alert is active. The money isn't coming. Gavin, your exit strategy is dead. The silence that followed was absolute. The noise of the restaurant faded away. It was just us in the ruin of their lies. You didn't leave me because you fell in love with her, I said, enunciating every syllable. You left because you wanted to cash out. You didn't leave for love. You left for money. Gavin slumped in his chair. Defeated. Jenna looked away. I turned my gaze to my father. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes, just as he had done when they attacked me earlier. And you, Dad, I said softly. You sat there and let them call me cold. You let them blame me. You knew something was wrong, and you said nothing because you wanted peace. He finally looked up, his eyes wet with shame. Your silence, I told him, is also a signature. I turned the heavy page of the binder to the section labeled Medical. The plastic crinkled in the silence of the restaurant. I smoothed out the document on top. A standard explanation of benefits form from our insurance provider. It looked boring, just rows of codes and dates, but it was the deadliest weapon I possessed. You all sat here and told me I was cold. I said, my voice low and steady. You told me I drove my husband away because I prioritized my career over giving him a family. You let me carry the guilt of our infertility. I slid the paper across the table toward my mother. She looked down, her eyes squinting at the small print. Read the highlighted line. Mom, I instructed her. Date of service 13 months ago. Provider Maple Hollow Wellness. Procedure code 55250. That is the medical billing code for a bilateral vasectomy. Permanent sterilization. My mother gasped, a sound that seemed to suck all the air out of the booth. I looked at Gavin. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched tight. He didn't leave because I wouldn't give him a child. I told the table, my voice never rising above a conversational volume. He blamed me for an empty cradle, while he had already locked the door and thrown away the key himself. My mother looked up at Gavin, her face pale. Then she looked at Jenna. The implication hung in the air like smoke. If Gavin had been sterile for over a year, then the baby Jenna claimed to be carrying the baby that was supposed to secure the house, and the money was a biological impossibility. Jenna looked at Gavin. For the first time all night, her expression wasn't smug. It was terrified. She looked at him like he was a stranger. You said, Jenna whispered. I didn't finish. I interrupted. I flipped to the next tab, labeled Pregnancy. I pulled out a color printout. On the left was the ultrasound photo Jenna had placed by my cake. On the right was a screenshot from a public social media profile of a woman living in Ohio. I ran a reverse image search on the photo you sent to the group chat last week. I said, "It is amazing what you can find. This photo belongs to a stranger. You didn't even pay for a high-quality fake. You just downloaded a stock image." Jenna shook her head, her hands trembling. "No, that is not true. You just confirmed it on camera." "Jenna," I reminded her, nodding toward the bar where Alyssa was still recording. "You pointed to that photo and claimed it was yours. You just went on record committing fraud to extort property." Gavin suddenly slammed his hand on the table. "She is lying. Reese fabricated these. She printed fake documents to confuse you." I did not flinch. I simply pulled my phone out of my pocket and unlocked it. "Do you want me to call Dr. Henderson?" I asked Gavin, holding the phone up. "His number is right here on the insurance claim. I can put him on speakerphone right now. We can ask him about your post-op recovery. Shall I dial?" Gavin's mouth snapped shut. The fight went out of him instantly. I reached into the binder for the final blow. I pulled out a stack of printed text messages. "And just so we are clear about the intent," I said, laying the pages out like tarot cards. "These are the messages between my husband and my sister from 3 days ago." I pointed to a highlighted bubble. "Jenna, we need to make her cry in front of Mom and Dad. If she feels guilty enough, she will sign anything." I pointed to the response. "Gavin, wait until the parents start pressuring her about the house. She is weak when it comes to them. We will get the signature and cash out by Friday." My father made a noise deep in his throat. It was a growl of pure, unadulterated rage. He grabbed the paper, reading the words that reduced him to a pawn in their game. They had banked on his silence. They had calculated his cowardice. "You." My father's voice shook. He looked at Gavin, his face turning a dark, dangerous red. "You thought I was weak. You used me to hurt my daughter." "Mark." "Calm down," my mother whispered, but she was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the wreckage of her family. "No," my father yelled, slamming his fist on the table. "I will not calm down, you people. You are sick." He looked at me. His eyes were full of regret, but I met his gaze with a cool detachment. He was on my side now, but he was late. Too late to save my heart, but just in time to witness the sentencing. The atmosphere at the table shifted. 10 minutes ago, I was the defendant. Now, I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "I am done listening," I said, closing the binder with a final decisive snap. "Now, you are going to listen to me." Just as the silence at the table became unbearable, a man in a nondescript gray suit approached our booth. He did not look at me or my parents. He looked straight at my husband. "Gavin Price," he asked, his voice flat and professional. Gavin nodded dumbly. The man dropped a thick manila envelope onto the table right on top of the fake ultrasound photo. "You have been served," the man stated. "That is a petition for divorce and a temporary restraining order freezing all marital assets pending a forensic accounting investigation." My mother reached for my arm, her eyes pleading. "Reese, please, don't do this. We can fix this. He is family. Don't destroy his life over a mistake." I pulled my arm away from her grip. I looked her dead in the eye. "This is not a mistake, Mom," I said coldly. "A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. This is a calculation." He calculated that I was too weak to fight back. He calculated that you would force me to pay for his new life with my sister. Jenna suddenly turned on Gavin. The realization that the money tap had been turned off finally hit her. "You said you had it handled." Jenna screamed, shoving Gavin's shoulder. "You said the loan was approved. You said we were moving into the house next month. How am I supposed to pay for that apartment? Now I broke my lease at the old place I thought she would sign," Gavin stammered, shrinking away from her. "She was supposed to sign, 'You are useless.'" Jenna shrieked, "You are broke and you are useless." They began to tear each other apart right there in the middle of the gilded vault, screaming accusations about money and broken promises while my parents watched in horror. The perfect couple had dissolved into a mess of greed and panic. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. "Gavin," I said, my voice cutting through their argument, "you need to leave my house tonight. I have already called a locksmith. The locks are being changed as we speak. Your clothes are in boxes in the garage. If you step foot on the property, I will have you arrested for trespassing." I looked at the binder one last time. "And just so you know," I added, "I am filing the fraud report regarding the loan application and your shell company in the morning. I am not doing it to be mean. I am doing it so you never do this to another woman again." I picked up the check that was still sitting on the table. I placed $40 in cash on top of it. "That covers my wine and my salad," I told the waiter who was hovering nearby, looking terrified. "The rest of the bill belongs to the gentleman. He insisted on separate finances, after all." I picked up my purse. I did not look back at my crying mother or my silent father. I walked away from the table. As I passed the bar, Alyssa raised her martini glass to me. I gave her a small nod. I did not smile. This was not a victory lap. It was an evacuation. I walked out into the cool night air. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Mary Ann, my lawyer. "Bank confirmed. The home equity line of credit is dead. Fraud flag is active. He can't touch a dime of the equity." I got into my car and drove home. When I walked through the front door, the house was silent. Gavin's clutter was gone. The air felt lighter. It was quiet. But it was the quiet of safety. It was the quiet of ownership. I walked into the bedroom and stood before the mirror. I reached up and unclasped the diamond stud earrings I had bought for myself. I placed them on the dresser with a soft click, like a soldier laying down a weapon after a long war. I took a deep breath. I did not lose a husband at my birthday dinner. I lost an illusion, and for the first time in my life, I stopped paying to be loved. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mia Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me,